Welcome back, Fleur community. I hope everyone's doing well. Happy Monday. Seems like we've got a few people in the house. Organic Third, we've got Stephen, we've got Haspala, we've got, to be frank, Anna, nice of you to join us as well. Victor and Stephen, and finally Freddie coming in late there. Nice of you to join us as well. I know you don't normally catch these streams as well. So yeah, today we're going to have a quick look at this. And I've got to give a big shout out to the Xtoads team. And Kingsman, they was the one that brought this to my attention just half an hour ago, and Chanley was there with a tag just to bring it to my attention. So happy days. I've been waiting to watch this for a long time. It's basically Hugo speaking about building safer reorganizational resistant bridges, and he's speaking at Permissionless, and this was a big event that was hosted a couple of weeks ago. So we finally have the stream, and yeah, I thought that it would be nice to watch it together. This is my first time watching it. I'm going to take some notes, and yeah, I guess we can talk about it a little bit afterwards and discuss what's been said. Let me just check how long this is. So it is 16 minutes, 43 seconds. So I guess let's give it a listen and see what's going on. If there is any audio issues, I don't think there is, but if you want the audio levels turning up, do let me know in the chat and we can certainly get that sorted. Let's jump in.
Yeah, I'm Macaulay Peterson. I'm an editor at Blockworks News. Yeah, I'm really happy to be joined by someone who I have gotten to know just a little bit in recent weeks and has a very interesting project. And this is Hugo Phillion from Flare Network. And well, to start with, I just would like, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a brief introduction about yourself, your background, and what Flare Network is, since it has yet to launch. There may be people in the audience who don't yet know as much about it.
My background is I was a commodity
volume. Yeah, there we go.
Let's get some volume. I was a commodity volatility trader at a couple of hedge funds in London. Got bored of that, decided to go back to university and study machine learning. And that's where I met my two co-founders, Nairi Usha and Sean Rowan. And we're now a team of about 45 people spread across Slovenia, Sweden, US, Portugal, predominantly engineers, about 40 engineers and about 5 ecosystem people. And Flare is essentially a fast EVM layer 1. It has 2 core protocols that kind of make it interesting as a layer 1. First is it has a native oracle for prices based on proof of stake. The second and possibly more interesting mechanism is it has something we call the state connector. The state connector is a deterministic oracle. It's the only oracle in the space that actually has a consensus protocol. So it's a binary forking consensus protocol that uses the network to come to consensus over external data. And this allows Flare to act as an eye in the sky.
Okay. When people think about bridges, I mean, probably a lot of them will come to many of the bridge hacks that we've seen in recent years. These are recent months even, that were very high profile. And when we're talking about security of bridges, I think it's probably helpful to just sort of identify what are the main problems with current bridges that are centralized to outline how your solution is an improvement.
So broadly, most bridges are set up as a multisig. Either a pure multisig, which is backed with trust, so that's something like Wormhole, where you have essentially a company that is standing behind that multisig, or a different type of, essentially a multisig, actually a TSS, whereby you essentially have a group of nodes who have put stake in. And the idea is that the stake keeps those nodes honest. Problem with, obviously, the trusted version is it's completely trusted. And probably with regulation coming in, it'll be harder for people to use those kind of trusted bridges. But the other issue with the sort of more, the ones that aim to have some decentralization through using stake, is that ultimately you you can get to a point where the bridge has too much value on it, and you can't really secure just an arbitrary amount of value with stake. You can end up, in a way, with a run on the bridge. We haven't seen it yet, but it wouldn't be surprising. And then, of course, when you have these sort of multi-sig setups, you do have the possibility of attack. Something like Ronin is a good example there.
All right, and you mentioned the state connector. You also have, that is part of your bridging infrastructure is called layer cake. And layer cake, to me, sounds like a metaphor. Is it? And so
Yes,
can you explain that a bit?
So it's essentially, we want to be able to bridge between all the different L1s and L2s. Layer cake uses the state connector, so it's essentially a product that we're building on top of Flare. Layer cake is interesting. It has a different design to the existing bridges. So basically, the operators of layer cake, they move collateral. So let's say you're operating ETH bridges between any chain. They move collateral from ETH to Flare. Flare holds that in a smart contract. The state connector can observe what has happened on the chain. Each smart contract can only move in one time step. Each smart contract can only move the amount of collateral that is held on Flare. And so this is in contrast to the existing bridge model, where when you get an attack, you see the attacker trying to move essentially as much value as they can out of the bridge. So this is sort of acts as a natural speed limit to the bridge. But it means that you can have as much value on either side as you want, but you just have essentially an amount that can be bridged in a particular period of time. We think this gives a lower attack surface, but it also means that that collateral can be used to bail out the bridge if the people who are operating the bridge are either attacked or are malicious. And it can bail it out 100%, which is why we call it in-short bridging.
Yeah, so we've seen, for example, in the wormhole exploit, where the collateral of ETH, in this case, was drained very quickly in mass. And so you're saying because it's, this puts sort of limits on how much collateral can be taken in any particular period of time, then that sort of thing is not possible.
Yes, so there's kind of a trade-off between speed and safety. We can also, with layer cake, we can move any amount of value between two chains, but we're just going to do it a lot more slowly. Because otherwise, you do have that issue. And, if you look at something like Ronin, they didn't appear to have a particularly, robust warning system to be able to observe that they were being hacked. And so, yeah, we basically have this concept that we have what's known as bandwidth, monetary bandwidth. And we hold this collateral, which represents the bandwidth. And the amount of bandwidth that's available is essentially how much that can move between different chains.
Mm-hmm. And does that amount of bandwidth can scale up based on the amount of people that are interested in using the bridge and providing liquidity?
Essentially it works a bit like a DeFi protocol. The more collateral we have, the more the bridge can handle. But we then have a fee market that incentivizes people putting in more collateral based on how much utilization the bridge is getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the themes of this conference has certainly been MultiChain future, and trying to understand the difference between MultiChain and CrossChain. You have a term for your bridge that you called a multilateral bridge. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that and why that's fundamentally different from existing CrossChain bridges? Okay,
so I think we're slightly conflating two things. So the way I look at multi-chain is something like, Cosmos is multi-chain, Polkadot is multi-chain. And the idea there is that they have essentially a safe way to handle reorganizations. Cross-chain today, even with the bridges, they can suffer from reorganizations on one chain against another. Flare's layer cake actually takes collateral against a reorganization and holds it for 12 hours to a couple of days. So if you're bridging from one chain and that chain has a reorganization, Vitalik highlighted this very clearly in a Twitter sort of message he put up a couple of months ago. The bridge can essentially lose the collateral from a chain reorganization. So we allow fee takers to earn a fee for operating the bridge, but they're also providing insurance. So occasionally, when there is a chain reorganization, which is rare, they will cover that expense. But that's the difference between cross-chain and multi-chain. But multilateral bridging is a different thing. So bilateral bridging is where you have essentially a bridge, let's say from Ethereum to Solana, and a bridge to Ethereum to Cosmos. And let's say you move ETH to Solana, and you also move ETH to Cosmos. So now you have SETH and you have CETH. Now you want to move either of those tokens to Avalanche. The problem is that you now get two more tokens out on Avalanche. You get ACETH and ASETH, and those aren't fungible. And what this does is it completely fragments liquidity, meaning you have to swap, and the swap markets are very expensive, or have been, so, heretofore. With Layer Cake, because Flare sits in the middle of it all, we can enable you to bridge, so long as you're using the Layer Cake system. The Layer Cake contract on a chain will treat tokens coming from any other chain from which there's a Layer Cake contract equally. So your CETH and your SETH are just issued as one standard wrapped ETH on, say, Avalanche.
Right. So this is wrapped assets. When a lot of the existing bridges work by putting in the native asset, let's say ETH, and then what you get out is a representation of that ETH that's locked on Ethereum mainnet. But that wrapped asset, what you're saying is in many cases only valid on the chain in which it's issued.
Well, all the bridges have different properties, so you can't really treat each bridged token equally. But by building essentially, rather than trying to build bilateral bridges, a good thing to remember is if you're trying to build bilateral bridges across, say, the top 100 chains, you would need 4,950 bridges to connect them all up. Whereas we can do that just with 100 smart contracts, one smart contract on each chain that can basically, because Flare can observe all the rest of the chains.
So what then is the role of the state connector in all this?
So the state connector essentially enables the insurance to be paid out when there's a malfunction.
It's a kind of it's related to oracles of the.
So the state connector allows Flare to have essentially a view or come to consensus on the state of any chain or in fact any API.
Yeah, let's maybe look at this by just giving an example. What a user who wants to do something with their ETH on another chain, how would they make use of this bridging solution in a way that they can't now?
Sure. So say they want to move ETH to Solana. They can move it to the Layer Cake contract on Ethereum. Whilst their money is in transit, it's insured on Flare. The people operating the bridge will essentially sign the transaction over on Solana. They'll take the fee for doing the bridge, which is why they've put up the collateral in the first place. And now they have, let's call it SETH, right? Layer Cake SETH. So they can use it in DeFi and whatever. Maybe the DeFi returns are not as good or something happens over on another chain. Now, instead of having to bridge back to Ethereum and then bridge from Ethereum to Solana, they could just bridge directly, from Ethereum to, say, Avalanche. They can now just bridge directly from Solana to Avalanche.
Uh-huh. So then this goes a long way to addressing the broader problem of liquidity fragmentation?
We think so, yes.
Yeah. How is that going to, in the long run, benefit all of DeFi? If we do imagine a multi-chain world, where does that? Can you flesh out a little bit what the importance of trying to solve liquidity fragmentation on different chains is?
So I think a good parallel is like imagine you have a dollar yield instrument from one bank in, say, New York that's AAA rated. Let's say you have another dollar yield instrument from a bank in somewhere else that's maybe BBB rated. You simply can't treat those assets the same. So they don't provide the same function because your risk on them is different. And that's what bridges today are doing because you're ending up with weirdly different assets all over the place with lots of different letters and names in front of them. And so what this could do is it could help smooth out, essentially, you can have DeFi protocols on any chain that can take in a layer cake asset, assuming they like layer cake, and this just allows you to essentially use your ETH on any chain.
And then that would also avoid user error, in a sense, that we currently see sometimes. You read stories on Twitter about a user who has a particular flavor of wrapped asset, and then they send it to an exchange, let's say, but that exchange hasn't yet enabled that particular flavor, and it basically ends up just stuck somewhere, and maybe the exchange can get it out eventually.
And I think another good example of this is also we think we can apply the same model so that we can have NFT bridging, whereby the user specifies how much insurance they want. And then whilst we don't think that's particularly interesting when it comes to, say, art NFTs, it gets a bit more interesting when it's like game assets, and you want to be able to use a game on different chains. And let's say you have some asset that is equally valid in a game that's pegged to Solana, and it's the same game asset that's equally valid on a chain pegged to, say, Avalanche. So you can move that asset, but also importantly, you can probably build a DEX for, say, in-game commodities like gold or rubies or whatever, which allows people to trade those assets and for whatever they need in a particular game.
Well, that's really interesting, and that's actually a use case I hadn't really thought of. But of course, we're very likely to see much greater proliferation of different chains, app-specific chains as well for something like games that require really high bandwidth. Yeah, so there'll be single purpose or limited purpose, more centralized but higher throughput. And what you're saying is that this could provide a framework for taking these NFTs that broadly represent the same item or class of item and being able to pass them around between these chains.
Pass them around, or basically create a new form of DeFi where you can trade essentially in-game commodities.
Anyway, Flare has yet to launch. I understand it's getting ready for audit, and then you get to go on vacation. But in the best case scenario, what are the plans? When is it planning to launch?
So our Canary Net's up, and that's testing the price oracle. And yesterday we released the client side for the state connector, which is on our Canary Net. It's called Songbird. So we're in audit now with a very large audit company, Trail of Bits. And assuming the audit goes well, we'll release in July. Hopefully July 4th, that would be quite fun. And then we hope to get Layer Cake out by the end of the year.
I guess reference to the Independence Day here. You're not a native of the US, I gather, but
I'm not, but my co-founder is.
Excellent. Yeah. Then good luck with the audit, and look forward to testing it out and seeing what can be built on top.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your attention.
Well, there we have it. I thought that was great, and I think it's just really inspiring to see Hugo just talk with such confidence about this. It's been a long time coming. I know people are definitely waiting for this launch, but it's very complicated, and I think there was some key takeaways there from that particular interview, and a lot of it we already learnt about in the community call. But the main thing that they're trying to address when they're trying to build these, when they're going to build these better bridges, is that the current system is not very good. The multi-signature style of creating bridges is not good, and multisig, for those of you who don't know, it means multiple signatures. So when you, for example, bridge from Bitcoin to Ethereum, where people may want to use Bitcoin in some DeFi solutions, so they bring it onto Ethereum, there may be a central company which says, you deposit your funds and we'll issue you some wrapped Bitcoin, let's say. And the wallet which holds all of this collateral is in a wallet which requires multiple signatures to transfer them. So maybe there is that potential exploit where these group of people that want to collectively sign to perform something, a malicious attack and extract the funds, it's always a risk. And, multisig, it's not very good. And there's also this idea as well that the bridges that are coming to Fleur, they're going to be 100% insured. And these are going to be insured by what we know now as the bandwidth providers. And the bandwidth providers are going to provide collateral, and they're going to get a small fee for doing so. And I believe Hugo said in the community call that when the layer cake solution is at full flow, that bandwidth providers could be expected to earn in the region of 37% APY. And that's off the top of my head, but I remember it was definitely in the 30%. We also, I guess, in this conversation heard about bilateral bridges, which is, I guess, again, the traditional way, and this is not very good. Bilateral meaning from one chain to another exclusively. So from Ethereum to Bitcoin and Bitcoin to Ethereum. And then, this really does fragment liquidity, as Hugo said, because it means that you have different assets, like say a wrapped Bitcoin on just one chain, and then, you're going to have wrapped Bitcoin on another chain and another chain. But the way that the Fleur networks is going to do it with layer cake is that it's all going to be a single token, and this is going to unify liquidity and not fragment it. In addition, as well, we learned from the community call that this type of bridging scales linearly and not quadratically. And you heard Hugo reference this here, where he was talking about to connect the top 100 cryptocurrencies. If it in a bidirectional manner, it's going to take, I think he said 4,000, 3,000, 4,000. It doesn't matter what the actual figure is. It's a lot, right? And especially a lot if you can compare that to the Fleur network, I guess, solution, where to bridge the top 100 cryptocurrencies, you're only going to need 100 smart contracts. So it's a lot easier to do. It doesn't become exponentially more difficult and time consuming. I really do think that this is a network for the future, and I'm really happy that you guys are here for the ride as well. That was a great little segment there, and I'm actually going to be breaking this and the community call down further. I'm actually partly releasing my Layer Cake Deep Dive series, which I guess takes the best bits from the community call, and I will be releasing the next, part 2 on Wednesday. And if you're part of the Patreon, you get to see that on Tuesday. Right at the end there as well, something that I found interesting was Hugo mentioning layer cake. So obviously we know that the Fleur network is intended to launch on 4th of July, and that's obviously going to include some key components which are already functioning well on the Songbird network, obviously the FTSO, and hopefully the state connector. But he did mention that layer cake is hoping to launch by the end of the year. So that's something to take into consideration. It's not going to launch straight away, and it's the same with F assets. It's going to be a staged rollout. Okay, I think it's important to keep everyone's expectations in check. Just like when the Songbird network actually, when it launched, we had the FTSO rollout, and it was a staged launch, and it was, I guess, a gradual approach. But the Fleur network is going to launch with a lot more oomph, let's say, because it's going to have all of these components which are already part of the Songbird network, which have already been thoroughly tested. Matata Inu talking about bandwidth providers. Yes, I'm going to go over that in the next video, which should be releasing for everyone on Wednesday, as I said, Tuesday for Patreon members. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I'm really glad that you guys tuned in to watch this live with me. I think I'm going to wrap up here. So I do obviously have the Monday stream later for anyone who's interested in joining that, around 5 hours from now. And that's going to be the weekly catch up. So hopefully I will see you guys there. And with that being said, let's say thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, I'm out.